Good evening and good day, and welcome to Module 7 of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the Workplace Certificate. Yes, I said Module 7, and unfortunately, probably fortunately, the last module of the certificate. We are so grateful that you are still with us after all these weeks and still with us on this wonderful journey. But please don't let this be the end of this journey. It is the beginning of your journey. And as we noted last week, please make sure you visit Academia Center for all the quizzes. And make sure you remember, all seven quizzes must be taken by May 19, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. And also, please remember that about 2 weeks after May 19, we will start processing and issuing badges and certificates via email. And of course, more on that later after tonight's session. Please remember, tonight's program will be about 10 minutes longer than expected, but I can assure you it is for a good cause. Tonight is the night. Tonight we will celebrate the completion of this program, but more importantly, we will celebrate your graduation. As I mentioned last week, we will be holding a virtual information session on May 12, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time to talk to you about different programs offered at the Muma College of Business as requested by many of you. That's the link for the virtual session, but also we included a code so that you can just take a picture of that code, takes you directly to the link. All right, so we have a great program. We wanted this to be a memorable session and module for you. So the opening segment, I will have the pleasure to talk with our president, the USF president, Steve Curran. We will talk about how to create long and lasting strategies related to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. And President Curran will share with us some really interesting insights on how he has done it over the years. Then our panel will be broken into two parts. In the first part, our wonderful Alexis Mutu is going to talk to two leaders from USF Health, Dean Kevin Sneed, the Dean of our College of Pharmacy, and Shirley Smith. And they will talk about the pandemic, healthcare, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. The second part of the panel, Dr. Mutu is going to lead a discussion featuring three very amazing and incredible successful women with different life stories and careers, but all of them will share with us some really interesting insights and lessons learned about diversity, equity, inclusion in the workplace. Then the instructional model, or the instructional segment, if you want. This week, Alexis, Sharon, and Terry will put it all together and tell us on how do we apply everything we've learned so far to build and embed diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, in the fabric of the organization, so it lasts long time and it does not get jeopardized when people leave the organization. This, again, is a great instructional segment. And now it is my immense pleasure to introduce to you our fearless president, USF Assistant President, Steve Curran. President Curran, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
Well, good evening, Dean Lamayan, and hello, everyone, and thank you so much for allowing me to join you for this session. So it's my pleasure to be with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, President Curran. Let me tell you a little bit before we even start about my boss, our president. We're so lucky to have Steve. He's been with us now a little bit more than a year and a half, came to us from South Methodist University, and we're just thrilled to have him our leaders. He is not like most presidents. He's actually a scholar, intellectual who he still has done and he's still doing research at a very high level, wrote many books, and we're just so happy to have him with us tonight. And also for some of our participants, if you don't know a little bit about USF, let me tell you, at USF, it's a big organization. It's a big machine. 52,000 students, 16,000 employees, and a budget of $2.2 billion every year. And also, more importantly, the total economic impact of USF is about $6 billion. So it is just a big business, as we call it. And Steve, so I think you really are so keen on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace at USF. And you have done so many excellent things. So let's start with, if you don't mind, talk to us, President Gural, about the importance of having DEI as a strategic priority and how to institutionalize and sustain DEI effort over time, because that's really the topic of our module tonight.
Yes, well, Moaz, I know that during the certificate program, you all have been covering many fascinating topics. And so I'm pleased to be with you tonight to share a little bit about how we can sustain, how we can diffuse, how we can institutionalize the diversity, equity, and inclusion activities. So I'll share a little bit about what our experience has been here at the University of South Florida. So one of the early steps I took when I arrived at USF was to begin to try to coalesce the community around a shared set of principles of community. So this was a process that brought together employees, our faculty, our staff, as well as our students to have a dialogue, a campus-wide dialogue about what are those shared principles that guide how we interact with each other, how we treat each other with respect, with dignity, how we're inclusive of different perspectives than ours, whether they be different perspectives in economics or politics or religion or a national background or language. And so we went through about an 8-month process where the community had this dialogue and articulated a set of principles that have been now enshrined on our website and a lot of our promotional materials that convey this shared sense, this common sense of how we wish to conduct ourselves, how we wish to engage in deliberations. And one of the things that was most interesting about this exercise was, in addition to the value of the principles themselves, the process of having that discussion was also helped knit together our different stakeholder groups here in the organization. And so in addition to the deliverable from that process, we also really benefited from this the process of engaging in discussions with each other about how we should treat each other and how we deliberate at the university as well. So Moaz, that's one example of what we did to begin to convey our sense of commitment to DEI. And I'll also mention that we're also very committed to fostering equity in terms of employee compensation and reward systems. So I know that's probably a topic that you've covered at some length now already in the program. But we created a salary equity review task force to look back and look at how we're compensating our employees to ensure that we're being fair in the way that we do that. And that also had symbolic meaning and showed the initiative by the leadership of the university to convey our sense of commitment equity in terms of compensation and reward systems.
Thank you so much, Steve. And I really like this recommendation and what we've done here with the principle of community. So that's our first lesson learned here. We highly recommend that organizations everywhere get through a process and say, what is really important for us as a community to work together? And I know you always, as our leader, refer to this principle of community. So it's not just right there, it's written somewhere. We always refer to them. I know integrity, I know respect, and I know accountability and transparencies are part of these. So thank you. Great first lesson. The other question I have, Steve, is we always have a saying is, if anything is everybody's job, it's nobody's job. So one of the things that we really worked on in our effort here at the USF in terms of DEI is the importance of accountability. And how did you tackle that to make sure that there are parties who are accountable for our progress?
Well, that's a great point about accountability. And so we have been very evidence-based and data-based in the way that we are planning our activities and tracking our progress. So we want to be very transparent. We want to be open to conveying information to the public and to our employees about how we're doing in terms of DEI. And so we've established what we call the Diversity, Anti-Racism, and Equity Dashboard. So D-A-R-E, DARE Dashboard. And that is a way for us to track how we're doing in terms of the organizational climate and culture of the organization. It also is relevant to leadership and management because then we can show stakeholder groups how we're doing. We can track our progress over time and how much progress we're making on all these, on a number of key performance metrics. And so some additional examples of those are the degree to which we have people of color in the leadership team of the organization. Also, our breakdown, for example, our racial breakdown in terms of our faculty and our staff and our students. And so we're being very open and very transparent with all of our stakeholders to ensure that they know how we're doing. And frankly, it takes some courage to do that because by being so public and transparent about it, it shows some areas where we need improvement. And we've made great strides, but there are also areas where we have a lot more work to do. But this way, we can convey to all of our stakeholders how we're doing and show that we're willing to be assessed and evaluated and to be accountable to all of our people involved in the university. And that has been received very well. Just a symbolic sense of how transparent we're being, how willing we are to take a hard look at how we're doing, where our strengths are, where our weaknesses are, and so on. So also on accountability, we have many people from across our organization that are involved in these activities, but we also have specific people who are accountable for overseeing, leading these efforts, creating vision and strategy. And so I've taken a number of steps to ensure that I have individuals at the vice president level who are really held accountable for tracking these metrics and intervening, developing programs, stewarding those programs to success. And so that transparency, that credibility, the accountability in terms of the DARE dashboard and having specific individuals who are responsible is also part of the overall web of accountability that we're trying to create.
Great recommendations, Steve. Thank you. So what gets measured gets done. Monitor your progress. Be transparent. It's okay. People need to see. And we always say it's a journey, right? And the most important thing is to move through that journey and also have people accountable for that progress and monitor. What a great recommendation. Thank you, Steve. Now, we talked a lot, and you mentioned even this evening, Steve, culture. It is so important. Our topic tonight is how we can make DEI sustainable over time. And I really believe, like you, that it has to be embedded in the cultural fabric of the organization. And I know you've done so much research in this area. So I would love to see, how do you think, what can we tell our 135,000 plus in terms of embedding the DEI in the organizational culture? What kind of advice you give them?
Well, so we've already covered material, and you have in this course about having a strategy, a formal plan, having metrics. We just talked about accountability and metrics, and yet even beyond all of that, as you said, Moaz, we want to create a culture that really embraces diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so this is actually a bigger challenge in many ways, to really build a culture where our employees, and in our case, our students, also embrace these ideas. So what we've tried to do is to create an environment where our employees feel empowered to share their views and their concerns as well. And so it's very important that we as top leaders and managers are showing that commitment and having that accountability and transparency. But we also have to take actions to create an environment where there can be grassroots discussions and debates and dialogues about how the university, how the organization can do a better job in DEI. So we've been trying to create that kind of openness. We've welcomed groups, a variety of different groups in our university to form their own ideas, to develop documents that share their concerns and their requests and shine a light on areas where we can do a better job. And so again, that takes some courage for those of us in leadership and management positions, because we have to let those grassroots activities take place, and not try to just be completely top down in the way that we build culture. We have to foster and cultivate those grassroots activities, and we have to be willing to hear some very candid and open.
Sometimes not as candid.
That's right. I mean, exactly. We have to have courage not to be offended, and be willing to think about how we can improve our structures and our processes. And so we've had really great experience with that. And in fact, a number of the individuals who have been involved in those grassroots committees or task forces have actually emerged as individuals who I have put into leadership positions. And I was delighted to do that, in part because they have built their own credibility with their own interest groups, whether they be racially oriented groups or political groups or other kinds of groups. And so I've allowed them to kind of form their own leaders, and for them to coalesce around those who they believe have their trust and their credibility. And so then I've welcomed into my leadership team, and that has actually been well received. And it's shown that we have the openness to welcome into our leadership team and advise us about how to do an even better job in DEI. So that's really been one of the success factors that we've seen that are it's a little bit counterintuitive, in the sense that sometimes we have concerns about groups going in a direction that's not consistent with what leadership and management are suggesting. But I urge our leaders and our managers to have that courage to allow that process to take place and to welcome those individuals. And I found them to really be incredibly responsible and accountable in terms of their own behavior. And that has really fostered a more open dialogue and has reduced barriers. It's created more of a more permeable boundaries between the leadership of the university and our faculty and our staff and our students. So I would just challenge all the leaders and managers listening in on this session to look for areas where you can foster those grassroots activities and bring those individuals into your leadership discussions to talk about how to improve. And I think you'll find that by and large, these are very productive discussions, and also really break down some barriers and build some bridges out there in lots of different subgroups within the organization.
Great recommendation, President Corral. I really like the courage. I like that, the grassroots, and being comfortable with the uncomfortable, and being really open to receiving the feedback, and let these leaders emerge from that grassroots discussions and promote them and listen to them to advise the leadership team. President Corral, this has been just really tremendous. We cannot thank you enough for giving us your insights and really your thoughts on this very important topic. But more importantly, I really have to say it publicly for our 135,000 plus, this certificate would not have been possible without the support and the empowerment of our president. When I went to him to the idea, I did not even finish the sentence and said, this is great. We need to make a difference. We need to be good for our community. President Corral, thank you so much for what you do for USF, for the students, and for everyone. And have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your leadership. And we're just so delighted that the Muma College of Business and the University of South Florida is able to contribute to dialogue in our society and with the business community about how we can do an even better job in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So thank you so much for the opportunity to join you.
Thank you, Steve.
Hello, this is Alexis Mutu, and what a great conversation we just heard with Dean Lamayam and President Corral. So I want to transition now to a great conversation we're going to have today about the pandemic, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and generally the healthcare industry and how the pandemic is being handled in light of D&I. I have the great pleasure of talking with and introducing you to Dr. Kevin Sneed, who is a tenured professor and a founding dean of the University of South Florida Tunisia College of Pharmacy. He also serves as Senior Associate Vice President for USF Health, and Dr. Sneed received his Doctor of Pharmacy degree from Xavier University of Louisiana College of Pharmacy, where he received numerous clinical and leadership awards. Dr. Sneed's research and clinical interests include the advanced pharmacological treatment of patients with cardiometabolic disorders, examining healthcare disparities, and emerging health technologies. He's a national lecturer on these topics. So his recent research interests include the implementation of health equity practices, application of mobile health technologies, digital health application, and sports medicine pharmacology practices. Also, I have the great pleasure of introducing you to Shirley B. Smith, who is the Director of the Office of Student Diversity and Enrichment at the University of South Florida Morsani College. Ms. Smith has worked with individuals from diverse socioeconomic, cultural, and ethnic backgrounds throughout her career and is a champion for diversity and inclusion. Ms. Smith is passionate about improving the lives of individuals living in economically depressed and medical underserved communities. Ms. Smith has established partnerships with nonprofit organizations, colleges and universities, local high schools, and clinical faculty to create programs with a focus on increasing medical students' cultural and linguistic competency. She has an ability to connect and communicate effectively with individuals from the C-suite to the front desk, born from her understanding of executive leadership, principles, and broad experience as a professional development coach, mental health counselor, and professional advisor. Thank you so much, Dr. Sneed and Shirley, for having us, for joining us today and having an important conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the pandemic, and your industry. So, Dr. Sneed, understanding that your workplace is, the world of pharmacy, how has the pandemic demonstrated the importance of D&I as a pivotal factor in a sustainable business model?
Well, Ms. Mutu, first of all, thank you very much for having me here with you all today. I think most importantly, it's really, we have to understand that when the pandemic hit, we've been long before the pandemic even came, we've been dealing with decades and maybe even centuries of health inequities here in our country. One thing that really did speak to me very loudly in the very beginning was the fact that the people who were being most affected were those in the Black and brown communities all over the country. We found it happening in New York. You can go over to Detroit, you go down to Louisiana and New Orleans, and all over what you were finding were people that were primarily African American that were really being most affected. But not only did it really affect the workplace, but now we really had employers really beginning to explore exactly how it was affecting their community. And we often don't think about the fact that many of the people who are working in our workplace get their same health inequities in their work back in their communities. And now their families were being affected. Their families were the ones that were dying, the ones that were going into the hospital. And they really began to even affect what was happening in the workplace for many people. And so we have to really begin to look at African Americans in the workplace and begin to better appreciate what's happening, not only when we see them on a daily basis, but what's happening behind the scenes in their life. And how did the pandemic really begin to affect not only what we saw initially, but when they even left and had to go back and take care of family and even deal with families that were dying. So I think the workplace overall, from a diversity and inclusion standpoint, we really began to understand that we have to do much more to shore up, the health components of our workers. We have to better appreciate the communities that we're coming from and do everything we can to bolster, if you will, the balance of what we do both in the workplace and in our work life or in our communities back home.
So Shirley, having heard what Kevin has just talked about, what are your thoughts and what have been your challenges around the work that you're doing in the pandemic and D&I?
Well, I would say that COVID and the pandemic created opportunities, tremendous opportunities in academic medicine, with everyone accepting the fact of this inequities that they were seeing. They always knew they were present, but it really was just magnified with this pandemic, and so much so it could not be ignored. And so I felt that medical schools and communities and medical education was responding and saying, how do we need to train the next generation so that they can attend to these equities before their patients, something like this happens? What does that mean? What are the changes we need to give in information? What skills do they need to know? What attitudes do they need to have? And what knowledge do they need to obtain so that they can adequately address and engage their patients so that they are authentically seeing them for who they are, acknowledging their experiences, and taking that in consideration when devising the best treatment plan for them. And so a lot of medical schools have begun to add serious curriculum. We're doing a longitudinal curriculum at the medical school, and it's really about understanding the historical context of race in medicine, where it's come from, and understanding how we unpack that and how we try to dismantle that structural racism so that we can move towards a medical practice that really lines up with the ideals that it has.
Thank you so much. So Dr. Sneed, the conversation that you've had and Shirley has had is so timely. So what is it that you'd like for us to do now? What are our next steps, particularly when you're thinking about a business model and thinking about the pandemic, thinking about vaccinations? Do you have any advice for us as to how we move forward in making this world and your field more diverse, inclusive, and equitable?
Well, I really do believe we have to get beyond the theoretical. We have to get into social impact right now. Companies have a much broader opportunity, as Ms. Smith mentioned, to get into the community and really begin to make the permanent changes that really we all want to have. The most important thing I think the pandemic showed us overall is that when our communities are not healthy, our companies cannot be healthy. And we really want people to be very happy when they come into the workplace, but we need companies to go out there and now work with health insurance companies. We need them to work with all the social determinants of health We need elected officials to be involved. We need our community-based and faith-based organizations to be supported. We need social impact at a time to make permanent change right now. Shame on us right now if we don't do more to take advantage of the all of the witnessing of the underbelly of health inequities that we've been experiencing. So if companies cannot make that change right now in the midst of all the change that has occurred over the past 15 months, then clearly we will not only have missed out on an opportunity, but we probably will further deepen the health inequities moving forward because we did not take advantage of the opportunity to make that change right now. So I think I would encourage all of our companies to really seek social impact and make it not just part of a written statement, but really make it real and felt out in our communities.
That is so timely and so appreciated for you to articulate that so well. Shirley, did you want to follow up at all on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the social impact, right, and the social, what is our social contract that we have, right? We're in place where the organization is, but also how far out it reaches. But I think you can't ignore what's actually happening within your place of business as well. You have to create a culture where all your employees feel valued and heard. If you can generate that culture in-house with the people that you spend the most time with and engaging, then you should be able to magnify that out to the people who are actually consuming your products, right? They will feel that too, because when your employees feel it, that vibration just continues outward and it magnifies, right? So I really would just employ organizational leadership to be reflective, right? Of themselves, of their way of engaging the employees, way they promote employees, way they acknowledge employees. Be willing to look at what you're doing, and if it's not the way you want it to be or you get that feedback, that's an opportunity for improvement. It's not necessarily bad information, you know, especially when you're looking to aspire to do better and you really want your values and your actions to be in sync. Take the feedback, create safe culture where people can feel comfortable given that feedback, and then the organization can generate this culture that reverberates to everyone.
I have to thank you both, Dr. Kevin Sneed and Shirley Smith. You have basically provided a brilliant summary of all of the various modules that we have had since March 24th around how do we move forward, how do we move our business model to this place that is sustainable with diversity, equity, inclusion. I thank you very much for participating in our certificate program, being part of our Module 7. Thank you so much for all that you do and continue to do, and I appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Thank you
for your time.
Thank you. So now we're going to move forward and transition to a panel that I'm going to lead with Dr. Jennifer Arnold, Yvette Segura from USAA, and Nadine Smith from Equality Florida. I look forward to talking to them. Thank you. Hi, so it is my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Jennifer Arnold, who is currently an attending neonatologist and medical director at the Simulation Center at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital. She is an experienced neonatologist, medical educator, healthcare advocate, and simulation researcher with a passion for delivering high-quality patient care through innovation, technology, and effective debriefing. She completed her undergraduate Bachelor of Science degrees in biology and psychology at the University of Miami in Florida. She then completed her medical degree at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine in Baltimore, Maryland. She attended a pediatric residency program at Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh. During her fellowship in neonatal perinatal medicine, she obtained a Master's of Science in Medical Education from the University of Pittsburgh. She is board certified in neonatal medicine. Dr. Arnold has a rare type of skeletal dysplasia or dwarfism, which involved more than 30 orthopedic surgeries. She's a 4-year cancer survivor. Dr. Arnold and her husband, Bill, are featured on TLC's docudrama, The Little Couple, which follows their personal and professional lives and is now in its 10th season. She's also appeared on television programs, including Oprah, The Today Show, Good Morning America, Dr. Oz, The Doctors, Anderson Cooper, and CNN, among others. Welcome, Jen. I also have the great pleasure of introducing you to Yvette Segura, who is Vice President and General Manager of USAA Southeast Regional Office in Tampa, Florida. She provides leadership to 2,600 USA employees in Tampa and is the senior USA officer in Florida. Her responsibilities include serving as the primary USA representative to regional civic, industry, and military organizations. She's also the senior on-site integrator coordinator for community affairs, corporate communications, facilities, information technology, business continuation, and people services. Yvette Segura has worked in the insurance industry since 1984 and has been with USAA since 1989. During her tenure at USAA, she has held a variety of leadership positions in the property and casualty company. Throughout her career with USAA, she has lived in several cities across the US to include San Antonio, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, Colorado Springs, Colorado, and Tampa, Florida. She holds both bachelor's and master's degrees in business, as well as CPCU and CCLA designations. She's held board of director positions with various nonprofit organizations in every city she has lived in. And last but not least, let me please introduce you to Nadine Smith, who is the co-founder and CEO of Equality Florida, the state's largest organization dedicated to ending discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. A former award-winning journalist turned organizer, Nadine Smith was one of 4 national co-chairs of the 1993 March on Washington. Mrs. Smith was part of the historic Oval Office meeting between then President Clinton, the first such meeting between a sitting president and gay community leaders. She served on the founding board of the International Gay and Lesbian Youth Organization, which celebrated 30 years in 2014. Nadine Smith is a Florida Chamber Foundation trustee, board member of Green Florida, and served on President Obama's National Finance Committee. In 2013, she was named one of the state's most powerful and influential women by the Florida's Diversity Council. She was also given the League of Women Voters Women of Distinction Award earlier this year. Nadine Smith serves on the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights Florida Advisory Committee. Welcome, Nadine, Jen, and Yvette to our panel today. I'm just really very impressed with your credentials and all the wonderful things you've done. So I'd like to start with my first question, which is, what are the benefits and challenges with incorporating a D&I framework into a sustainable business model? So let's start with you, Jen.
Excellent. Thank you so much again, Alexis, for having me here today. I think the benefits and challenges are many. So I'm going to speak a little bit on my own personal experience in the field of healthcare. Most importantly, from a benefit perspective, I think for folks that, like myself, may have a disability, the ability to relate and identify with your customers and having an inclusive, diverse team that includes physicians, nurses, other healthcare providers with disabilities, I think is a great benefit. When I was applying to medical school, as you can imagine, years ago now, some of the feedback I got was, well, how are you going to be able to do this with your disability? How are you going to be able to do that? And sort of a lot of perceptions that if I was to become a doctor, I had to be capable of all fields of medicine. And definitely there are challenges. We all have limitations and challenges, whether they're obvious or not. And, I knew that there were certain fields that would be harder than others, but I still believe that there was something I could contribute to the field. And what I've come to realize is that by having that perception as an employer that, your team members need to be able to fit the bill for sort of all of the different types of jobs within a discipline, then you lose out on a lot of, I think, great talent. And, I think what we've realized in healthcare more than ever is that, having a disability, having been a patient, it brings so much to the table, so much more empathy, so much more compassion, and so much more ability to sort of identify with the experiences that your patients and families are going through. So I think the benefits are tremendous to, being inclusive and to really, just sort of thinking outside of the box about what people can and can't do. And also, more importantly, the challenge is, recognizing that you may not know all the answers, and the best way to find out whether or not someone can do something and can they contribute to your workplace is just by asking the questions and being honest and transparent.
That's lovely. Thank you so much, Jen. So Yvette, as someone who identifies as a Mexican American and Hispanic, what are your thoughts on my question?
Yeah, well, I think similar to Jen, the benefits of having DEI into your organizational framework certainly allow people to really thrive where they are. They can see people that look like them and have the ability to be successful. And I think it's important for people to be able to relate and see themselves in those positions or given those opportunities that they'd really like to have. I think that people of whatever demographic they happen to fit into or identify with is important that we have that makeup within an organization. And I really loved what Dr. Sneed said earlier about the reflection of the community and the need for that to be, if that's healthy, then a company is healthy. And it's so true. We are a reflection of our communities where we happen to be. And people have to be able to reflect and relate to the organization where they work. We've heard throughout the last 6 modules that the business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion makes it, kind of gives the reason why you want to do this from a pure business standpoint. But truly, for people to thrive, they've got to really be able to feel a part of that organization.
Thank you so much, Yvette. So Nadine, what are your thoughts on this, particularly with the great work that you do?
Well, we spend a lot of time talking to business leaders. We have a program called Equality Means Business, and the goal of it is to improve Florida's national and international reputation as a welcoming and inclusive place to live, work, and visit. And the need for that, or the conversations that we've had as a consequence of that program, I think have really been illuminating for me. And I would say the number one challenge that I see in companies is that they struggle to articulate why it matters beyond feel-good reasons. Meaning, I want to be a good person. I want to be inclusive. I think it's, it makes for a more comfortable work environment if people can get along. And what it lacks sometimes is that it is mission critical, that you will not be able to do the job that you set out to do. You will not be able to do it effectively. You will not see the things that your life experience doesn't allow you to get that vantage point. You will not be tuned in to changes in the market. Right now, America is going through a massive demographic shift. We are increasingly a nation of older white people and younger Black and brown people, not exclusively, but we are going to be a multi-racial country where there's no single racial identified group that is dominant. And what that means is that it is roiling all of our systems, our politics, the cultural landscape, and it's part of why we're having this inflection moment that we're having that feels like such deep division, because there's a panic that has set in, where when you've grown up in a world where X marks the spot for one particular demographic, in this case, if you grew up in white people in a world where you were accustomed to seeing only white people be president, and suddenly there's a Black president, it is dislocating. What does this future mean? Where do I fit? Will I be treated as a minority? Is treated in a country that has not always treated minorities well. So, the thing that I think of as the biggest challenge in effectively embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion is not seeing it as a little bit of, lipstick and rouge, a little bit of, the group picture looks nice, but more of our organization cannot meet its mission. We will fail to long range plan if we don't understand that this isn't etiquette lessons. We're not just talking about people being nice to each other. We're talking about bringing in a range of perspectives, and that there will be difficulties in doing that. There will be challenges. And if you have a framework that says, hey, I'm trying really hard to be nice to you, you people, that is the place where where it gets tough and where people back away from those, what they call commitments, but really those commitments aren't in the DNA of the organization. And I would say this about it: if it is smooth sailing, if you are patting yourself on the back a lot, chances are that you haven't gotten to the place where the friction arises precisely because now you're talking about power and privilege and hearing things from people who usually just swallow their words because they don't expect to be heard. And when you get to the place where people who usually don't say what they really think and really feel and don't bring things forward, when you get to that place, that's when you're really doing the work.
Yeah, if I could just add, I'm sorry, Alexis, I just would love to add to that. I think it's so important that this commitment within an organization around DEI framework starts from the top. Yes. In order for it to truly be sustainable, there has to be this acknowledgement and this recognition that there's not an end. It's a continuous journey, and it's a continuous journey of improvement as we get better at it, and as we learn to recognize maybe our warts, where we haven't done so well, and how might we overcome some of that as an organization. How do we truly go beyond, as Nadine was talking about, more than just the statement? It's now, what are those actions that we have to put into place if indeed the people on your team are going to truly feel included? Because it is more than just the words and the etiquette lesson. It truly is, in order to be sustainable, it has to be incorporated into your goals. It has to be accountable through all levels of the organization, and it has to just become a part of your fabric.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Yvette, because we're talking about operationalizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just talking about it, right? And so to those ends, Jen, have you experienced or have you seen D&I initiatives that have actually been successful, that have, helped you to thrive or helped your business to be a better business?
Yes, absolutely. So again, I think storytelling is sort of the way I like to share based on my experience. And I think, to give you an example, when I was starting off as a neonatologist, I had a conversation with my first employer, and one of the things that had happened originally is they had suggested how, to get me to the patient on an on a warmer, sort of allowing someone else to carry a step stool to come with me to every delivery. Delivery rooms, they're emergent, right? You never know when you're going to get called. You never know what patient is going to be in distress and need more help. And as a physician, I'm ultimately responsible for the care of that baby. And, at first I thought, well, that's really nice and generous, but it had this feeling in my gut that wasn't right. Like, now I'm going to have to rely on somebody else to make sure that I can do the job that you hired me to do. And so there was a sense of, not thriving. And what we talked about, though, is they said, well, what would work for you? And I said, well, if you would be willing to just put a step stool in every room and have a location for it, then I can be completely independent. I don't have to rely on someone else, and I can be successful in my job. And it was like a light bulb went off for that person, and they said, absolutely, that is a easy thing to do. And, from there on out, completely successful in feeling confident that when I was running to the delivery room to resuscitate a baby, I wasn't going to be stuck without the tools that I needed to be successful. So I share that as an example. Again, I think what employers can do, and I think what's worked well for me, is just having that conversation, being open to it, and then, wanting to meet their needs. Because ultimately, I think all employers benefit, because when employees, team members feel like we are supported and that things are equitable, right? Not just that I can get to that patient, but that I don't have I have as little barrier as possible as anybody else on that team. And so when things are equitable, I think that's when we thrive. And as staff, we go above and beyond. We enjoy our job. We go to work happy every day. And I think that's what helps businesses to really succeed, is to not only be diverse and inclusive, but to really be equitable.
So you can always storytell, because that what you just shared with us is truly amazing, and a way for an organization to pivot. They didn't think about it, you told them, and they moved forward and did what needed to be done. And so that's amazing. So Yvette, with this huge organization that you work for, with all of these people that you essentially report to you, what have been your successes in terms of D&I and making sure that those successes have longevity?
So I think, going back to, it starts at the top. One of the things that I've been so proud of at USAA is the fact that, one, we facilitate the financial security of military and their families. That's our mission, right? Well, nowhere in there does it talk about diversity. However, diversity truly is at the core of our military community. When you think of the makeup of the military, they truly are diverse. And so our customer base is diverse. And so that's our North Star. And then one of our USAA standards that helps us define how we do things. We just recently, and this is the part that I'm so proud of, we just recently added a standard that says we will embrace diversity and be purposefully inclusive. Again, getting back to that commitment and that accountability. And then when you take that into actionable steps, some of the things that we have done is we made a 3-year, $50 million commitment to work on and provide philanthropic giving to organizations who are working towards racial equity and working to improve that. Hugely proud of the company that I've worked for so many years to see this effort being done, building in our corporate responsibility strategy, building DEI into that as well. And so it really allows us to put into action what we feel and believe is important, but now that helps us hold ourselves accountable. And a few years ago, we started these what we call Get Real conversations, where we would have members of different groups speaking, different demographics, talking about their own personal experiences. This was pre-pandemic. It was pre-George Floyd murder. Post all of that, these Get Real conversations have evolved into some really raw discussions that I feel really, it makes me feel great to work for an organization that has this environment where we want to hear from each other in this raw way about some of their experiences and how we can all learn from that and how we can get to know one another on a much deeper level than we ever had before. So those are just a few examples of things that we're doing.
And those are phenomenal examples. Thank you so much, Yvette. And so Nadine, I'd like to know what examples that you can share with us, because we are time sensitive, and so you get to close us out and talk to us about some of the ways in which you're able to see success in D&I and your spaces.
Sure. Well, one of the things I just want to underscore is how elemental and obvious it is to ask the impacted community what works for them, and how rarely it happens. Because a culture of wanting to fix things and being urgent about fixing them, and less willing to simply listen and respond to the community that's directly impacted. I would say that the other piece of this that I think is really important for people to understand is that we don't just, where we work, where we live, the community surrounding us all impact what happens in our jobs, right? And so I know talking to, I remember Florida Blue was telling the story immediately after the previous presidential election in 2016, how the spike in anti-Muslim sentiment had increased to the point where an employee of theirs, not on the campus, but walking in downtown Jacksonville, had garbage thrown at her and anti-Muslim slurs. She wasn't Muslim, but she wore a head garb. And what they realized was, we can't just say, hey, as soon as you get to work, we have a mechanism for responding to that. They understood that they had to go out into the community and address that as one of the biggest companies in that area. And I think that piece of understanding that this isn't just about am I making the workplace and the environment at the company work? It is about understanding the interconnected and the relationship between these. When I said earlier that we're in the midst of a demographic shift where it's called the graying and the browning of America, where the older generation is overwhelmingly white and then the upcoming generation is more multiracial, part of that is the healthcare disparity that has white people living longer. And when you talk about things like lead in the water or where they put up high tension power lines, it tends to be in poor communities and places where people don't have the political resources to stop it from happening. And so then you have another layer of health outcomes that are negatively impact a community. And so understanding how all of these things are connected, and that is why it's important to us to work with companies that understand that their obligation, their responsibility exists well beyond the campus of their corporation, well beyond their campus period.
Period.
And that you can't just solve one piece of the problem. You have to, it's like a baton. You've got to carry your part of it and understand how that all connects. So as long as people understand, this isn't just, it's not etiquette. It's not about being nice, although we should have etiquette, we should be nice. It is about understanding that the path forward for our country is a place where everybody listening to this, everybody on this panel knows that there's a future for them, a future for their kids, a future that means something. Or if we try to create a world where some people can be held back and other people benefit from that imbalance, that power imbalance,
right,
we're going to have chaos.
So thank you, Nadine, because everything that you have said sort of allows everyone on this in this program to really understand what they can do. What you've provided for us today are opportunities to think about how we do things that are long lasting as opposed to things that are just done immediately. The three of you are simply phenomenal. And I really thank you very much for being part of this program, for talking with me, and for sharing such wonderful wisdom, just generally to all the people listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Terry Boyd, your host for today. And today, we're going to discuss how you can incorporate DE&I into your sustainable business model. With me today are my colleagues, Alexis Mutu and Sharon Hannah West. Hello, ladies.
Hi, Terry.
Hi, Terry.
Alexis, would you please remind everyone what we've covered with the past 6 modules?
Absolutely, Terry. But before I go over what we've covered thus far, I want to acknowledge that we, the University of South Florida Muma College of Business, Jabil, and the Lightning could not have all the answers to every question regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. As we developed this program, it was clear that this journey illuminates areas needing improvement and that it is always evolving, as we're enlightened about existing and new groups and any corresponding knowledge with those existing and new groups. But we are up for the challenge, aiming to always be on the path to learn and to share. So we started our journey on March 24th, delving into the topic of emotional intelligence. Why emotional intelligence? Well, it can be taught, and it provides opportunities to look inward and discover what we can do to be better citizens and leaders. It also allows us to realize we should work on ourselves. That was Module 1. From Module 2, we learned about stereotypes and biases, whether being treated differently due to race, ethnicity, age, gender, sexual orientation, religion, disability, and other traits. We learned of the notion of the death by 1,000 paper cuts when people are subjected to stereotypes and the insidious nature of biases. In Module 3, we learned about the importance of inclusive leadership, diversity in our supply chain, and other ways of looking at your organization with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Module 4 gave us steps to lead our organization to be diverse, equitable, and inclusive. We learned that diversity should not be feared, but it should be cheered. So when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, what gets measured gets done. In terms of measurements, quantify your liability for not having diversity, but also quantify the strategic components of diversity, equity, and inclusion that are embedded in your organization. We received an inclusive leadership model and the 6 C's: commitment, courage, cognizant of bias, curious, culturally intelligent, and collaborative. In Module 5, not only did we learn about the importance of diverse talent being key to an inclusive culture, we learned how to recruit and retain diverse talent. We were introduced to how big data can identify gaps in diversity, equity, and inclusion with respect to hiring and retention, but also where to find talented, diverse candidates. Module 6 introduced the idea of extending diversity, equity, and inclusion into the communities we serve. We learned the importance of supporting our communities where organizations operate to align with our corporate social responsibility goals in our corporate, business, or organization branding. Now I'm very excited to have my colleagues, Sharon Hannah West and Terry Boyd, talk to us about what we have learned thus far leads us to a discussion about what is a sustainable business model inclusive of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
And now, Sharon, let's talk about the sustaining process for DE&I initiatives we have spoken of in the past 6 modules. How is DE&I part of a sustainable business model?
Well, Terry, it's going to involve pulling all of these threads together. Our view of what constitutes a sustainable business model has really evolved through time. Our models used to be based strictly on profits. In the field of business ethics, we've been able to make a business case for corporate responsibility, which used to be viewed by many as optional or secondary to profits. Now we know that profit and responsible behavior are intertwined.
Yes, we do.
Organizations who ignore that do so at their peril. Ethics policies and programs are now expected to be included in all organizations. And this really marked the birth of the corporate social responsibility, or CSR era, which has continued to mature and expand. But in the 1980s, an overarching concern was addressed, and that was this idea of sustainability. The world's population growth, coupled with diminishing finite resources, had many countries wondering how the planet was going to sustain the lifestyles that we all aspire to. We had to figure out a way to grow sustainably. Now, the most widely used definition of sustainability is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It's based on the premise that sustainable growth requires a balance of 3 equal and interdependent sectors of society, economy, and the environment. When the 3 work together, we achieve sustainability. Today, we say a sustainable business is one that follows this triple bottom line.
Well, okay, excuse me. The triple bottom line. Could you explain that a little bit more, Sharon?
The easiest way to explain the triple bottom line, which is people, planet, and profits, and looking at the three at the same time, managing those balls in the air, is this idea of a three-legged stool. If we view our organization as a three-legged stool that's based on people, planet, and profits, we need to keep it stable. If a leg becomes weak, the stool is unstable and risks breaking. So we need to maintain and repair all three legs to have a strong company. And sustainability has become this umbrella term that covers all of an organization's efforts to improve its impact on its stakeholders. But another term relates to this as well, and that's ESG, or environmental, social, and governance, which refers to a set of standards for a company's operations that socially conscious investors use to screen potential investments.
Okay, excuse me again. What are environmental, social, and governance criteria?
Environmental criteria consider how a company performs as a steward of nature. Social criteria examine how it manages relationships with employees, suppliers, customers, communities in which it operates. Diversity, equity, inclusion is front and center in this. And governance deals with the company's leadership, executive pay, audits, internal controls, shareholder rights. So when you think about it, ESG spotlights the same three specific pillars.
So then increasingly, when CEOs, business leaders, and heads of business units speak out on diversity and inclusion, they're speaking out on values, cultures, and ethics. Is this right?
Right. Yes. There's really a revolutionary commitment to establish a unique company culture that's founded on the principles of ethics and inclusion. At the same time, we have current events and the national dialogue that has followed that, that's increased the pressure on all organizations, government, corporate, nonprofits, social service. They all need to step up their game in regard to being employers of choice and the go-to places for socially conscious products and services. Through visible CEO leadership, sustainability standards, community involvement, work-life balance programs, and diversity and inclusion policies, people are sizing up companies for who they are, not just what they offer. And so really, many say that diversity is the key to unlocking sustainability, because we must lead the cultivation of a more inclusive, equitable world for all. We not only must steward the environment, but also explore ways to meet the needs of the vulnerable and create healthy platforms for people of all backgrounds to embrace commonalities, to celebrate their differences, and to heal tensions.
Well, you know what? This all sounds nice, I have to admit, but how does this embrace the business case?
We all know very well that presenting a sound business case is going to be critical to gaining buy-in for any kind of a program. We want that buy-in from key internal players. Now, McKinsey provided some convincing statistics that demonstrate the value of investing in greater diversity and inclusion. So when we look at their 2015 report, Why Diversity Matters, they examined 256 public companies across a range of industries in Canada, Latin America, and the United States, and the UK, and they found some different conclusions. One is, they said that companies in the top quarter for racial and ethnic diversity are 35% more likely to have financial returns above their respective national industry medians. That's big. In the United States, they even determined that there, a linear relationship between racial and ethnic diversity and better financial performance. And they also found that unequal performance of companies in the same industry and country implies that diversity is a competitive differentiator that shifts market share toward the more diverse companies. One thing, though, that we can't eliminate, we cannot eliminate the costs that are associated with not doing it internally and externally. We can no longer afford to impose more externalized costs on society.
Wow. So explain to me, Sharon, what do you mean by externalized costs?
Externalized costs would be the costs that are generated by producers but carried by society as a whole. For example, a company may pollute water by dumping waste in the river, doesn't really pay for it. And this gets us back to the purpose of business. Okay, yes, we should make profits. Of course, we have to make profits in business.
Sure.
But not if the costs exceed the benefits, right? The effort that it takes to make your corporate culture better makes it better for business. But it also helps society as a whole. And this is about business being a force for good.
Okay.
Now, when we think about the cost too of changing our organizational culture, we've got time, training, lots of effort. It's small compared to the cost of not doing it. I really believe we have a duty to act right now. Doing nothing is not an option anymore because doing nothing is destructive.
Yeah, it certainly can be. I understand that. So the why and the what are very clear. Now, the big challenge is how. So Sharon, how does a sustainable business model incorporate DE&I?
Let me preface this by just saying, though, that all sustainability initiatives, this perceived complexity of undertaking them can be a deterrent to taking action. I remember a study that Accenture did of 704 CEOs throughout the world. And the number one reason for either not getting involved in any sustainability-related initiatives or doing more was complexity, or the perceived complexity. So we have to work at this to simplify the process, right? And I really think we can have a universal approach to apply to all companies. We did this, I actually did this with environmental sustainability. Big companies get this. The Fortune 500s, they've got chief sustainability officers. They work with the Global Reporting Initiative. They issue sustainability reports. They work and work and work to ratchet that down. But 80% of our economy is not big business. And so developing a simplified approach is key. We can do that with DE&I, and I'm about to tell you how. But the important thing is to get started. Many of us use a three-phase approach for creating any new plan or a model. It's basically assessment, vision, plan.
Okay.
When we think about the assessment, that's all of the stuff that it's, the homework that we have to do. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. The vision is really a mental exercise. We imagine what our organization would look like if everyone on our organizational team was pulling together as one. That's powerful.
Yes,
and the plan is how we're going to get there. But we also need to avoid policy making mistakes of the past. Some companies would draft ethics codes, have employees sign off on them, train their employees, go through the motions, right? But going through these motions, checking off boxes is not going to be effective. Companies that get it right don't just have employees sign off on their ethics code. Instead, they take real and meaningful steps to bring about meaningful change.
Okay.
And they work on the very core of their organization's culture. And each culture is unique. It's going to require some honesty, transparency, and soul searching. And there's no one size fits all, as each company may have different strengths, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities. But diversity, equity, inclusion, which is part of many ethics programs now, it has to be treated in the same way.
Okay, well, that's true, but what's the first step? What's the first thing we should do, Sharon?
Well, let's talk about that first phase, the homework that's to be done in there. And it's a lot, but you've got to spend some time because you need to understand the organizational structure and the motivation and commitment behind top management's interest in developing the program. That may change how you approach the program itself. You need to determine who your stakeholders are, what problems they've had, as well as the challenges the business and industry face. And some sample questions could include some that I've put on a sample question slide. Don't worry about reading that right now. It's going to be provided to you as a resource. But this is really, when you think about it, about changing your corporate culture. to make it be what you want it to be. It's not about looking good. It's about being good. And that benefits all stakeholders. So you have to create the plan that's best for you, your organization, and your employees. You will need to look inward, do some self-reflection, conduct some fact-finding gathering initiatives such as surveys, maybe focus groups, assess your company culture, and identify any unresolved conflicts and issues that employees might face.
So who would you talk to?
There's a lot of people you talk to, and you
Okay.
certainly want to interview. So, when you think about it, let's start at the top. The president, the CEO, top management. Move to middle management, key employees. Get a sampling of all employees at all levels. Talk to your customers, your suppliers, even your competitors, your community, and the regulators, because really what we're looking at is our history, our reputation, problems that others see, potential problems, attitudes, and trends, and trust. Now, I recently had an MBA ethics class that finished up the other night, and a group did their presentation on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we got into a class discussion of their thoughts and about where their organizations weren't performing. The entire class got into this. So I found 3 pieces that I thought I would share with you. One is, they said, listening. Apparently, some organizations are less interested in what their employees think that are needed improvements and more focused about telling them how they're going to fix it. The second one was to make it real. Make them believe that you mean it. And the third one was education. Give them the what, the why, the ROI. And so that kind of leads us into this ideal or the vision that we're going to have for our organization. So with our vision, again, back to that mental exercise, what's your organization going to look like if it was fully diverse, equitable, and inclusive? How would its work, its performance, employees, and products change? And I encourage you to be bold. Establish this as the ultimate goal for your organization. That's the pin we want to drop on the map. That's our target.
Okay. So after you've gathered your information and you're ready to really lay out your plan for the company, where will you start? That's the key. Who should have input and why?
I wish we could say we're just going to download a plan from the internet and put our name on it, right? But it doesn't work. Now, that said, researching how other organizations in your industry have done it is going to be valuable. But we're talking about building a culture. And
Yes.
building a culture is not just a role for HR. Management and employees at all levels have a responsibility as well. So having a sampling from all employee groups on a committee that reviews and revises the organization policies is going to have a better chance of really working and getting employee buy-in. So we want to include them to have a greater chance of impacting the way these people too interact with each other.
Okay. All right. So you've decided on your first steps and now you're ready to launch. Well, how will you do it to prevent employees from discounting the initiative before it gets started? I mean, who should make the announcement and why?
And that's critical important. We don't want employees to discount this, and we don't want them to become cynical. So I really believe a DEI program should attach to your ethics program, but it's so important that the launch of it in and of itself should be a big deal, and it should be announced by the very top. It all starts with leadership. Leaders must demonstrate why it's important. So many ethics programs have failed through the years because this was lacking. You might remember Enron's ethics program. At the time, it was lauded, great on paper, but it wasn't practiced by top leadership. It wasn't practiced by many people at all, and a huge company imploded. And it really started a chain reaction of a lot of companies that thought they had good ethics programs, but they weren't really following them. So this one is critical. We make it real. We don't make it employee policy number 247 that we send out for signatures and bury in the employee handbook. The launch has to be honest, sincere, promoted throughout the entire organization. Employees need to know, they need to sense that this is something that's different and that it's really important.
Okay. So what's your next step then?
Well, I think it would be training, and training can take different forms at different levels. It should always be combined, though, with group discussion and Q&A, particularly in this sector. We want to keep talking about it. We want to display our policy to everywhere.
Yes.
Now, when we talk about diversity and equity inclusion, the training is obviously important, but it's more than just providing information.
Okay.
It's got to be a springboard to turn our company culture into one that highly values diversity and all the ways that it helps our employees and our business grow and prosper. So when a culture is one where people feel that they are valuable and they're making a difference, they will be comfortable putting their best foot forward. We want to foster a workplace where all employees can feel confident in who they are and what they bring to the table. And that's a powerful way to drive creativity and innovation.
Well, I agree with you. We do want a culture where employees feel they feel informed. They feel as if whatever is going on in the organization, they understand, and they're being the communication is very clear and open. However, there always are going to be concerns. So how should employees raise their concerns?
Well, you know, in previous modules, we've emphasized that the goal is to create an environment where all employees are comfortable asking for what they need to be successful. But I don't think that's going to happen overnight in all cases, right? So some form of anonymous reporting should be provided, and it's always included in good ethics policies. It's important that we create a way where any employee can report an issue or concern without fear of reprisal. And it's not about creating a culture of ratting people out. This is about empowering people to report potential problems so that we can intervene before it becomes a headline, worst case scenario, right? And there are many ways that we can report. There even, you know, small companies can subscribe to telephone hotlines for reasonable costs.
Okay, true.
With good ethics and diversity, equity, inclusion programs that result in the shift of corporate culture, we're going to have greater control over our company's destiny.
Okay, so all right, so we understand how we have our employees involved in this process. Well, what about our customers? Are they part of the DE&I process as well?
Look at what's happening today, right? Corporations are finding themselves at the center of not just the deeply held values of their workforce, but their customer base as well. Right. Our best companies know that who they are is becoming just as important to people as what they are selling. So we must engage our customers.
So how can we engage not just our customers, but other external stakeholders like our customers?
Well, again, it's going to be different for different organizations. And it's often going to be based on the industry that you're in. But I asked Dr. Victoria Emmerich, who's Global Head of Sustainability Strategy and Operations at Bristol Myers Squibb, how they went about customer engagement. Good afternoon, Victoria, and thank you for joining us. Today, we've been talking about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, as part of a sustainable business model. And I was hoping you could share with us a little bit about your work at Bristol Myers Squibb. The first question I had for you was really, how is BMS engaged with its customers, and why do you do it?
So for Bristol, for people taking the course that aren't familiar with our company, we're a differentiated biopharma company, and our focus is on innovative medicines for patients with cancer and other serious diseases. So our customers are our patients, and our patients are at the center of everything we do. So our engagement with diversity and inclusion is as important to our patients as it is to our internal employee and our internal culture. And part of that is because, well, the main reason is because under-resourced and minority communities are at greater risk of poor health outcomes. And we believe that accelerating programs to drive health equity and diversity and inclusion are critical to moving the needle forward to positive change, and our patients deserve nothing less. And as a global biopharmaceutical leader, we know we have a role to play in addressing health equity, and we are taking steps to contribute in the areas where we can make a difference. And that is commitments include our determined focus on addressing health disparities and on increasing clinical trial diversity.
Now, do you actually invest in diversity and equity initiatives for your customers?
We do. In fact, Bristol Myers Squibb just recently announced in 2020 an investment. The Bristol Myers Squibb, the company, announced an investment of $150 million over the next 5 years to increase diversity in our clinical trials by by 2025 having diverse an increase, 25% increase in diverse sites for our clinical trials to base them in areas of underserved populations, and also in the education and policies to minimize health equity disparities and any other disparities that affect racial inequities. The Bristol Myers Squibb Foundation, separate from the Bristol Myers Squibb company, is also investing $150 million to put into training programs to educate clinical trial investigators that come from these areas of the unmet needs, in areas where there's lack of diversity and inclusion, and where the healthcare equity challenges are at their greatest.
Thank you. I did have one last question. What is the expected impact and the outcomes from these programs?
The expected impact, the other one I'll put up is we've committed to spending $1 billion by 2025 with Black, African American, and other diverse-owned businesses to help create jobs and generate positive economic impact to diverse communities often hit financially by systemic injustices. So the impact is a multi-parameter. It's creating jobs. It's from a balancing of the dollar spend that we put out into the communities, but fundamentally it's about reducing the inequities and therefore increasing the health and well-being of all of the patients that we serve, which is really what we stand for.
Listen, thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's a noble effort, powerful effort. And once again, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. And please check out our diversity and inclusion reports on bms.com. You'll find that we started this in the mid-1960s. We started our focus on diversity.
Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.
Another one that I thought of, which is completely different industry, was Orvis and the Orvis Angling for All pledge. Now, when you think about the business model of Orvis and their outdoor sports activities, think about a fly fisherman. What's your mental image? It's a white male out in nature enjoying fly fishing. Well, Orvis partnered with BFF, which is Brown Folks Fishing. Now, BFF launched the Angling for All pledge, and they aimed it at companies in the fishing industry. The pledge actually establishes a commitment to addressing racism and inequality throughout a pledgee's internal culture, through their consumer-facing behaviors, and the broader community. And they have a core curriculum that provides education and resources for these brands and their organizations to enhance equity and diversity across staff, executive teams, athletes, ambassadors, guides, throughout the organization's media and marketing. So when you reach out and partner with organizations that are working for change, it's another option. So I would say check, see what's out there, and be creative.
Okay. Well, I've never been fishing myself, but okay, things have been going pretty good. We've created a plan, we've launched a plan, we've got our customers involved, we've got our other external stakeholders involved. So, Sharon, are we finished?
Yes. No. You are never, ever finished. And we have to remember that if we have a lack of noise in our organization, it doesn't necessarily mean that there are no problems. We could have a breakdown somewhere in training or emphasis or even the reporting process itself. So to recap, this is a summary of suggested approach to implementing a diversity policy.
Okay. That's right. Well,
I have really enjoyed, I'm sorry, Terry. I really enjoyed listening to this presentation and understanding how I can bring the information that you've given us to operationalize what D&I looks like in an organization in the future, and certainly is giving me opportunity to know how to go back into my organization and make sure that everyone is heard, because the bottom line is transparency and listening. Active listening seem to be the crux of how to implement D&I, both from a policy standpoint to an operational standpoint. So I really appreciated listening to you and learning from you. Thank you, Sharon and Terry.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm so glad.
Well, everyone, excuse me, this has been our absolute joy to bring this discussion to you. We know that some of you are a little dismayed over not hearing your specific group or issue brought to the attention to our audience. But this program was not meant to capture every point, nor could it have. We said from day one, with a constant reminder, that this is a journey that should not, must not stop here. Please do not expect to be fully prepared by listening to just one source. Take this advantage to extend your journey from here and continue your quest towards cultural competence. Again, this has been just the beginning of your journey. Hopefully, we will have helped some get started and others to move forward. But for all, on behalf of Muma College of Business at the University of South Florida, we thank you for traveling with us this far. And we encourage you to continue your journey, as certainly we will. We'll see you down the road. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
And now it's time to respond to your questions. Please allow me to bring my colleagues back to the stage. Sharon, Alexis, will you please join me?
We're here.
Okay. Well, here's our first question. And Alexis, I'm going to ask you to take this. What are some of the measurable positive revenue benefits of embracing diversity and the negative costs of ignoring diversity?
So let me start with the measurable positive revenue benefits. The first thing that you're going to get is you're not going to spend a lot of money on turnover. Turnover is measurable. Turnover is very expensive. And a way to have a diverse workforce is to make sure that we've recruited them, as we learned in Module 5, and then retain them as we learned in Module 5, and not, bear the expense of turnover. But also, if we remember what happened last year, we saw a number of organizations that either rose to the occasion with respect to addressing issues of racial and social inequity, and those companies made money, right? Because their customers, and as Nadine Smith said, our world is browning, right? And so this is a huge customer base. And so we're able to engage customers and make them feel safe and feel good about what they're purchasing. So those revenue sources are measurable. And I'll ask Sharon to add to that. But from the negative cost of ignoring diversity is something we went over very specifically in Module 2, which is the liability of not having diversity. You open yourself up to lawsuit. You open yourself up to being judged in the business world as not embracing diversity because there's a meaning to that, right? And there's a cost to that, and those costs are measurable. Any organization will tell you. Certainly, Don Siller, the attorney that spoke with us, one of these modules, I don't remember at this point, was very clear about what it costs for us to not have diversity. So Sharon, did you want to add to that?
Well, sure. If somebody's interested in the straight business savings involved, there's actually some pretty hard research on productivity improvements, sales, that kind of thing. It's a fairly new area, but we're seeing that. And what we could do is, post some links on our resources page if anybody would like to see where, some of that research is going.
What I wanted to add is that Citigroup conducted a study that said that the U.S. has suffered $16 trillion of loss of revenue due to racism in the last 20 years. I didn't say million. I didn't say billion. I said $16 trillion due to racism. And this is Citigroup doing this research. So that's another resource that we can provide to you.
Thank you, ladies, for those responses. Is there another question? Okay, how can we do this if leadership is not engaged? It seems that in most organizations, leadership takes the first step. Anyone want to take that?
I'll be happy to, because we see this in a lot of sustainability related initiatives. I mean, and it's kind of a coincidence too, because just the other day I was speaking with a former student about just such a situation. So, when we're implementing initiatives, there are two different strategies. Both involve planting a seed, though. So if you've got top management support, we kind of go through the steps that we did earlier in my talk, and we determine best opportunities. We communicate with, we educate, we involve employees. Great, we need to form a steering group, and we need to have, a management team to oversee the initiative, launch the projects. It's wonderful. So what do you do without top management support? Generally, with sustainability, I always say find a low risk, high potential way to start the discussion. If leadership doesn't do it, then you've got to have a champion within the ranks. That might be you. And you can do it, as I suggested above, but the thing is to get some interest going, a few easy wins, and suggest that leadership get involved and implement the policies. It can only make the organization better. But to my student, I actually said this. I said, why don't you start a lunch and learn group? Play a module. We're going to, have all of these resources available to you for however long. But then maybe lead a discussion. Something. Keep it easy, but keep it straightforward. Something like, let's talk about how this applies to us. Most of us, like most people, harbor unconscious biases which impact the way we interact as well as our decision making. Or you could say, what have you noticed personally? Or I'd like to get your thoughts about how you think this unconscious bias impacts our work, right? So
also competition. Doing some research and showing how competition is actively operationalizing D&I, and that they can see, sort of return on their investment doing that. And so, most organizations want to be the best. They want to make the most money. I mean, it's perfectly normal and natural. And so this is a way to encourage leadership to see what it means and the return on investment with D&I.
And I also think it's important to create a sense of urgency, right? Yes. I mean, we don't want this going to the back burner. It is important that we do this now.
Yes.
Well, again, the question is if leadership is not open to it, and how do you impress leadership to get involved? And sometimes leaders can be just as frightened by the whole issue of D&I as any other employee. So you have to take a more neutral approach to it. Mm-hmm. There's such a thing as diversity in thinking, where you're not necessarily talking about diversifying your workforce, but you're talking about how do you get your executive team to begin to think differently. Once you can get your executive team to begin thinking differently, now you can begin to approach them about the whole issue, the whole concept of DE&I and its benefits for the organization. So it depends on where the champions lie within the organization, because there are champions, and it also depends on where their mindset is, on how you approach it. It's no blueprint on how to do this. There's no one way on how to do this. It depends on the gaps of intelligence, if you will, when it comes to DE&I.
Organizations have their own personalities, and we have to, tailor what we do according to the personality and the structure of that organization.
Right.
Yeah.
So why a diversity and inclusion policy? Do we really need to make this a policy issue?
We absolutely have to make it a policy issue. Policies mean that there's accountability. A lack of a policy means that you can make statements and never have to operationalize them, and never accountable for the fact that nothing has been done. And it makes it clear to the people who are working in that organization, or to the customers of that organization, to every level of that organization, that it is just words spoken and it is not an actual commitment. And so to that end, policy to me is critical.
Yeah, and when you think about what a policy is, it's really a set of rules or guidelines, right, for your organization. It enables employees to, follow a plan and to achieve a specific goal. But if we don't have a policy, then it becomes discretionary, right? I mean, policy sounds ugly, maybe, or mandates, or we don't need any more policies, but we do if we view them more as being helpful instead of punitive and just one more thing that we have to do. But yes, we want, I think we're comfortable when we have these guidelines, this parameter around us. It gives us some guidance as to, what we should do, what we shouldn't do, what we can do, what we can't do.
Well, you're certainly right, Sharon. They are guidelines, they are principles, if you will, but they're nothing but words on a paper if the organization does not comply with the policy. So
couldn't agree with that more.
Start with the policy, because as Alexis said, it's a way of accountability.
Yes.
Now, if you don't have the policy, you cannot call someone out on not doing what you think is the right thing to do if it's not part of the culture.
Correct.
And so it has to be, it's more important for it to be ingrained in the culture, but it starts with a policy. And then as you encourage people to follow the policy, as you lift the policy up so that people understand the importance of it, the organization's commitment to it, it now becomes part of your corporate culture. And then you have accountability. You have more than just guidelines, but you have expectations. And that's what's important. We have another question. Where can we find strong facts and figures on the economic impact of DE&I? Serious research on the impact of DE&I. We have plenty of that, don't we?
Well, and I think Alexis kind of alluded to that earlier, and I did too, if they're talking about, the hardcore economic impact. That research is beginning to emerge.
Yes.
And it might be kind of specific as to certain, like, as I said, it could be productivity gains, creativity, that kind of stuff. But, it's an emerging field.
It is. And it's both, scholars are delving into the subject from an academic point of view, but, business journals are also taking a very hard look at how businesses have been impacted because of lack of diversity within the last year. And so there's a lot of research out there. You just have to figure out what your business and your niche is, and then look for that D&I research around that niche. And it is emerging.
And sometimes there's a lag time there between, the actual T's being crossed. Yeah.
Yes.
And I have to apologize to our audience, because I did not get permission from my colleagues, Alexis and Sharon, to refer to them as ladies, because there are some women who take they take offense to being called ladies, and I had to learn that the hard way. So, Alexis and Sharon, do you mind if I refer to you as ladies?
We don't mind.
That's fine. And it's nice, Terry, too. I think that this has really created an awareness in all of us that, even though we might think that, we are on top of these issues, we have whole lifetimes of habits that we have to kind of undo.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay. ERGs, let's say, are an important part of DE&I in many companies. What are some thoughts on how to determine which ERG to initiate first?
Well, actually, Terry, I should have read the question and you should have answered it because you're the expert.
Well, but see, that's not my job tonight, but okay. That's a great question. When we talk about that, another question just flashed. Can we go back to that question? ERGs.
Yes. Which are the first steps?
The first steps. Well, it goes back to policy.
Mm-hmm.
We have to create the policies that empower, our employees and have them feel comfortable in moving forward. When we talked in module 5, I believe, in module 4, and we talked about resistance to change. Well, in fact, this is speaking to change and where it should start and how you should embrace. Here we go. And the reason why it's important to DE&I in many companies is because without our employees being able to move forward, without our employees embracing what it is that we're attempting to do, then remember when I said earlier, the policies just become words on paper. They're not embraced. They don't become part of the culture. So we must make sure that we initiate these type of processes in order for our DE&I initiatives to really take root.
Right. And I think I'm just going to go back to what Sharon said earlier. Every organization is different, and you have to meet each organization where it is to start. And so it wouldn't be prudent of us to give you specific steps because we don't know what your business is. We don't know where it stands in terms of an ERG at all. And so, but it's just paying attention to where you are and developing policy so that you can address D&I needs in your company. So we have the next question about, can we get a copy of the DARE measurement, DARE measurements? And so actually we can. I think that we can bring it up. At the very least, we can provide that as a here we go. So there's a website on USF main page. If you look at the URL at the top, as Dr. Corral said, it is part of the anti-racism website that has been developed very recently. And the DARE's dashboard is there. It just says view the phase 1 dashboards. And so that gives you a sense of all of the data that USF has been collecting with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so it's good to see that this work is getting done. So I hope that's answered your question. The next question is, what roles do businesses have when state legislatures try to limit diversity teaching and/or training? Sharon?
I'd be happy to take that, sure. I have for years believed in, talked about, worked in the whole field of business ethics, business responsibility, sustainable businesses. Business power is at the core of that. So businesses, state legislatures can go in a direction maybe that business does not feel is the correct one. So business needs to, at the very least, have that discussion, right? And start using their influence to correct what they think is the wrong path. That said, business power is important. It's big, it's real. It can be used in mild persuasion, it can go to harsh coercion. But the economic power of business is just one piece of that, and that's also a powerful sword. So if you believe in it, you need to stand for it, and your stakeholders need to see that you do. And as I said, not to bash, legislators, but we make mistakes. All people make mistakes. And so if you think there's one that's been made, you need to work hard to undo it. We are seeing this across the country with different initiatives. We are seeing companies heretofore that were, very disparate in perhaps their views, their industries. They're forming alliances, and they're trying to push back where they think it's wrong.
Well, let's be frank about this. Businesses have never allowed government to stop them from making a profit, as long as they did it legally. And so as long as businesses are not discriminating, what role does any government have in stopping a business from implementing policies and initiatives that they want to initiate on the behalf of their organizations and in the effort of generating income?
Well, but Terry, there are some stops, and mechanisms to do so. But when we think about it too, government is about the people and the people's will. And so if people think that this is wrong too, they need to speak out. Businesses, they also, are responsible to their stakeholders. So,
but Sharon, the question was, what do businesses do when government and legislators attempt to limit the DE&I initiatives?
Yeah, you push back, because see, government is capable of curtailing business. We do that through antitrust and things like that. If we feel that they need to, but the key
those
here
are laws, Sharon. Those are laws, and there are laws to prevent discrimination, are there not?
But Terry, people are also the laws, right? And
no.
Well,
the laws have been legislated and they're written. You can change laws, but as it stands, we need to help. We need to help the person who just asked this question.
Yeah.
As it stands today, we have laws that prevent discrimination. That's number one. Number two.
But we change laws all the time.
So I think that this is a wonderful conversation, right? And this is a clear indication of what happens when smart people get together and have, opinions that don't necessarily.
Well, but here's my point, and I think really I do align with Terry on this. But my point is this: people have power, right? Business is only in business because people give it the license to operate, and they can take that license away. And so if this all kinds, if it comes out of kilter, then it's really, ultimately it's people that must speak up.
So let's go to the next question.
What's the next question?
Yes, go ahead, Terry.
What kinds of questions should we ask on an employee survey? Well, we need to ask the type of questions that, lead us to understand the level of satisfaction that our employees have in the workplace. And that's where we start with our survey questions. It's not always about, income, but it's sometimes it's about how safe do you feel at work?
Exactly.
How much do you feel like you're being engaged? Are people asking for your input? Do you feel free?
Yes.
To speak and to offer your opinions without retribution?
Or do you have opportunities, right? Or do you have opportunities in the workplace? Opportunity for promotion, opportunity for projects, and for access to leadership. Those types of questions are really important because they illuminate where an employee is with respect to where they feel they fit in. Because it's not where they fit in; it's where they feel they fit in.
Right.
And I was going to also just add, that there's no shortage of question samples out there. I mean, seriously, they're all over the internet. And I would suggest, looking over a sampling of them, see if any groups of questions kind of jump out as being a good fit for your organization or your situation. And you're going to notice too, if you do a little bit of looking in this arena, that you're going to see some common questions and approaches. So, as I said, diversity questions are going to cover all kinds of things: gender, religion, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, disability, and inclusion questions are going to be different. As Alexis said, they're going to be more about, do we feel safe here? Are we comfortable? And those kinds of things. So, I would not worry about, inventing wheels that are already out there invented. So, I think I would just borrow the best.
Okay.
Last question.
Take us to 2031. What will the results look like from this DE&I course? Oh,
a perfect world.
Euphoria. No, what you're going to have, you're going to have a blended workforces. You won't have this whole issue about do I feel included? You won't have the mindset of, we need to have more of this group involved in our organization. You'll be able to look around and you'll see someone put it in one of our modules, a bouquet of people at all levels of the organization, from the top to the bottom, on the board. Those who are coming to purchase the wares of organizations. It would be a situation like it's hard to imagine, to tell you the truth, but I think we all of us who are working in this space would have our own understanding or vision of what that would look like. Wow, that's an excellent question.
But I actually think that as we have said all along, it's a journey. And so by 2031, there will be new groups that have been identified. We've seen this already. Right. 7 change, add, a new population that no one would have ever thought about back in the 60s and the 70s. And so we just need to be agile and smart about understanding that who we are is not a cookie cutter circumstance. And so we just need to embrace change and just sort of continue on this journey of learning about people and the things that we are not like, so that we can make everyone feel welcome. We can make everyone feel that they belong, hence that they're productive, hence having this great ROI. That's what I would see happening in 2031.
As Martin Luther King Jr. said, we will be judged by our character, not by the texture or tone of our skin. Yes. And I think that's going to be important, that we will be seen equal to all others. There won't be any differences identified based on race. That won't be the important aspect of decision making, but it's going to be on our ability to contribute to the organization.
Right. And I would just like to add that, we need to keep in focus that this is the right thing to do.
Yes.
And we need to keep going forward. We're talking right around the corner, but and to give some hope to that too. Honestly, if you had told me 5 years ago that we would be having the conversations we've been having in all sectors of sustainability, even though I had worked in that field for more than 20 years, I really would have been kind of cynical about it. So I do think we are in an era of positive change. We have to be. It's easy to get kind of sidetracked on some of the negativity that's around there, but that forces us to act quicker, harder, faster, and just remember that this is the right thing to do.
Yes, thank you.
So it appears we've come to a conclusion, but we want you to stay tuned because Dean Moaz would like to celebrate this experience with you.
Yes, this is the moment you have been waiting for. This is the moment we have been waiting for. You did it. Yes, you did it. And thank you to all of you, all of the 135,000 participants from all over the country, from all over the world. We are so grateful to you for taking the time from every Wednesday for the last 7 weeks to watch each module and to participate in a very much needed conversations and to consider the important information we shared with you. Thank you. And like my very good friend Terry said just a few minutes ago, it would be impossible for us to cover every group and every workplace and every issue in this certificate. But we are really hopeful that we gave you the foundation to continue your journey. Of course, it takes a lot of people and a village to prepare a program like this. So we're very grateful to our partners, Jabil and Tampa Bay Lightning, for their support and their sponsorship. Also, we're very grateful to all panelists, guest speakers, and educators who came together to help with this amazing program. Yes, this is how your badge and your certificate will look like. And now, this is it. Pay attention now, because by the authority vested in me by the University of South Florida, I bestow upon you the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the Workplace Certificate. Congratulations! Of course, remember, you still need to take all 7 quizzes no later than May 19th. And after that, you will receive an email and a video about how to accept your badge and certificate starting June 1st, 2021. This probably is, this program is probably the easiest part of the journey. Now, let the hard work begin. The hard work is ahead of us. Please take action. Apply the concepts, the know-how that you've learned to your own life. Then take a leadership role in helping to improve the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in your own organizations to help lead that change and to help everyone throughout that journey. I would like to leave you with this platinum rule. Please always remember it. It's not about treating people the way you want to be treated. It's about treating people the way they want to be treated. Again, thank you all, and congratulations to all of you. But before we go, it took so many people to make this program a success. And I would like to thank all the faculty and staff who helped with this certificate. Their names will be listed in the following video. Good luck, and hopefully our roads will cross again soon. Success to all of you, and thank you.